Hello. Welcome, everybody. We're just going to get started in a minute or two, just waiting for people to trickle in. And yeah, welcome. Really excited to have the conversation today. If you are just joining us, if you can, in the comment section, just maybe pop in where you're joining from and your role potentially. That would really be helpful as we have the conversation. But we're just going to give people a minute or so to join in and then get started. We're really excited about the panelists that we have today, and it should be a really fun chat, especially as you might be thinking through, in 2023, what and how do we do benefits? And so this should be a really, really fun conversation. So we'll just give it a minute. If now is your chance to, grab a cup of coffee and join us. But if you can, yeah, pop in where you're dialing from and your role. That would be really helpful. Awesome. Just give people a couple more seconds here before we get started. Alrighty, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So again, if you're just joining us, welcome. My name is David. I'm going to be your host for today. And we have a number of panelists here joining who are now on the call. We'll ask them to introduce themselves as well in just a second. And today we're going to be talking about navigating the employee benefits roadmap. So the journey to awesome benefits, as we call it. So we have a couple of people that you see have been joining us to have this conversation, and they'll all be providing their own sort of perspectives, which we'll introduce them in a second. Before we do, just wanted to, I guess, introduce myself. My name's David. I'll be your host here for today. And I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Ben. You might be wondering, if you haven't heard about us, what is Ben? And Ben, we're a all-in-one flexible benefits platform. And we help companies for all sizes really to make their benefits as flexible as possible. And as we say, our mission is to make benefits and pay work for everyone, everywhere. And so if you don't know about us, yeah, feel free to go to our website, and always happy to have a conversation as well. And I guess, why are we talking about the topic, right? To set the context. So in 2022, as we were thinking about what is relevant to chat about now, one of the stats that frequently came up is 93% of employers are noting a change in benefits expectations. I guess little did they know, in terms of, given the economic situation and everything that's going on in 2023, how is that impacting the way that companies and leaders are thinking about it. Definitely a topic of relevance, as employers are just trying to figure out what to do. The other thing that stood out to us is, 80% of employees find benefits confusing. And I guess, even myself, having worked in the benefits industry for a while, their benefits leaders find benefits confusing. So it's no wonder that employees find benefits confusing. So that's something that stood out to us. And the last thing there is, 54% of employees actually use their benefits, right? So while companies are doing a lot to support people through multiple stages of their lives, employees don't understand it, and as a consequence, don't use what's being offered. And so that's why we thought, a really interesting topic to discuss with a few experts that we have here on the call is, what should companies be doing in 2023 about their employee benefits, and how do they go about setting that up. So I guess, just to set the context a little bit, today's agenda, what we'll be going through, we'll do quick introductions of the amazing panelists that we have here today. We'll go into a discussion, which will be an interesting format, I think, because we've sort of separated this into 4 key stages. And then we'll also try to save a little bit of time for a Q&A. But as ever, as you're having questions throughout the conversation, please just pop into the comments in the chats, because we find that's the most helpful to have that discussion, and we'll respond to the questions as they come, basically. And I can see we have some people already responding in terms of where they're coming from and their role, which is really helpful. A lot of people joining us from the UK, from Berlin, from all over. So yeah, again, thanks for joining us. This should be a fun discussion. Uh, Cool. So then, without further ado, just wanted to quickly introduce our panelists here, and we'll just do a quick introduction from left to right, starting with Charlie, who's joining us from Hooray. So maybe Charlie, over to you for a quick intro.
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Charlie Cousins. I'm one of the directors at Hooray Health Protection. So, Hooray is a whole of market employee benefits insurance broker. So, we help companies from 2 employees up to 2,000 employees set up any of their UK benefits plans. So, this could be SMEs looking at health insurance for their first times, all the way to multinationals looking at UK plans or international plans. So, yeah, I'm here to discuss anything insurance related that comes up today.
Awesome. Thanks, Charlie. Maybe Elsa, quick introduction.
Sure. So, hi, I'm Elsa. I head up reward and people operations at a small European startup called Ankorstore. And we've got people based across 10 countries in Europe at the moment. Prior to that, I've got experience working for a big multinational company at global and local levels, primarily in reward. And at Ankorstore, we're currently on the journey to implement a benefits offer from scratch. So we've been partnering with Ben to implement our flexible benefits offer, and I can help you also maybe with some questions around how to set that up.
Awesome. Thanks, Elsa. And then maybe last but not least, Figen.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Figen. I have started my career in rewards some 16, 17 years ago in-house first, and then lately quite a few years, probably about 6, as a freelancer contractor supporting various usually multinational organizations in different kind of project work specifically, and very recently holding an interim VP of total reward at Go Student position. So a lot of experience with international benefits and how to go about implementing those in a meaningful way.
Awesome. Thanks, Figen. So as hopefully you guys can see, we have a bit of differing sort of perspectives in terms of Charlie coming from the insurance background, Elsa having just implemented and going through the process of implementing a flexible benefits platform and flexible benefits in multiple countries, and then Figen obviously having seen this from a total reward point of view and thinking about this more holistically. So it should be a fun conversation. And again, for those of you just joining us, if you can just pop in any comments or questions as you have throughout, then we'll try to get to them as we have the discussion. Cool. So I guess with that being said, I wanted to outline what we're going to be talking here today before we deep dive into it. And we've broken this down into, if you're just looking at implementing benefits to start with, like 4 different steps. The first one, thinking about, benefits is one component of reward more generally. And so how, should you potentially think about it, especially in the current environment, I think is an interesting place to start. Then going into how do you get buy-in, right, for what you think you might want to do. Charlie will lead us and had a conversation on, thinking about insurances and what to offer, which is a key component of any benefits package. So we thought it would be good to deep dive into that for a bit. And then talking about, do you go with a platform and what are the pros and cons and when a platform might be able to help, right, versus doing it yourself. So that's kind of the 4 steps. If you have any other questions related to that, again, if you can pop them in throughout so that we can get to it. But I guess we'll start with a conversation on, just generally, how do we think benefits fit into reward holistically, and maybe starting with you, Figen, like how do we think about, especially in the current environment, right? Like when it comes to an economic downturn and inflation and everything else that is happening. Yeah, so maybe over to you, Figen, in terms of how should companies think about this and what are you seeing out there in the market?
Thank you, David. I think probably, when I talk about benefits, I always cast my mind back to when I first started my reward journey and me going into the organizations and companies saying, no, benefits are okay. We just need to sort out our compensation. So benefits were there. And usually it was, your standard pensions, medical, life assurance, whatever else. And no one questioned benefits. Absolutely no one questioned benefits. I think the dial has shifted massively post-COVID. I think the conversations have shifted, the tables have turned. Candidates, employees no longer talk about compensation. It's seen more as a hygienic factor. The job is worth what it is. But I want to see how can the organization support me, my well-being, whether it's health, mental support, family, whatever that proposition looks like. So that dial has shifted massively. And of course, I think in the post-COVID world, I think we all thought, right, actually, as employees, we come first, and we need to make sure that we get our boxes ticked. So I've seen that the conversations now with my clients and the companies shifting from, right, we need to do something about compensation, but it's benefits that we struggle. We get asked about, do you have this and do you have that? And we don't. So how do we get there? How do we do that? How do we stand out in the sea of crowd, in the sea of organization that, candidates want to pick us and work for us? So it's an incredibly interesting shift that I have seen, and something that I've always thought about. Probably about 10 years ago, I used to think about this kind of new way of dealing with total reward. But finally, we are there, and I'm really happy as a reward professional that we are thinking outside of box. We are not just thinking, right, we need to provide a good salary and the benefits are there just, by accident. But I think when we look at the total reward and what we want to achieve from that benefit proposition, like anything in life, it starts with an idea, right? You start with an idea. And for me, that idea is the reward philosophy. What do we as an organization stand for? And what do we want to offer? I've worked with organizations in different industry, and I clearly remember the one in public health. And they said, well, we can't look after public health without looking at the health of our own employees. So our philosophy is going to be our own employee well-being. So they decided all of their health benefit will be at least at the 75th percentile, or not even the 90th percentile. So it all starts with that conversation around the reward philosophy. What do we stand for as an organization? What do we want to achieve? Are we looking after our employees only? Are we looking after our employees and their families? And it's even more pertinent now in this economic situation that we find ourselves, because we want to make sure that whatever little budgets we have, they actually stretch far more than giving a few individuals a pay increase.
Yeah, I mean, in the conversations that I've been having as well, it's very much that that is standing out, right? As in, like, hey, how do we do more with less, right? Is the typical thing, and ultimately, you can stretch comp as in fixed comp or variable comp so far, but a lot can be done when it comes to making benefits more impactful or efficient, I think, because a lot of companies aren't making the best use of that as far as what we see in the market. I guess, I don't know, Elsie, Charlie, I don't know if you have perspective on that in the conversations that you've been having with clients and internally as well, in terms of, hey, how does benefits fit in more generally with a total comp reward package, right? In terms of what you guys are seeing.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think since we've started, things have changed massively. And as Figen said, at the start it was, okay, life insurance, health insurance, and then it was done. You didn't really have anything else. And it was sort of, that's what you're given, you can accept it. And it's been fantastic to see the way the world has changed, where there are so many, I think in the last 2 years, the amount of different partnerships that we've had, with the amount of new products we're hearing, different things that are available on the market for things that you would have never heard before, from your financial well-being support, menopause support, everything is out there, and the conversations are opening up a lot more across the industry. I think, as you know, Dave, one of the reasons we started to work with you guys is it's great that with Ben, it gives everyone the flexibility to really choose what they want. And I think that's the thing these days with staff. They don't want to be told, do you know what, this is what you're going to have as your benefit. This is what you've got to accept. And this is really the normal. Or, do you know what, this is a company the same as us. They offer it. Let's go here. So it's been fantastic to see how the total reward package has changed. And I think for everyone, for us as a benefits consultant, it's been, for insurance in particular, we've had a lot of change that we've had to adapt with in going, okay, well, this is what is traditionally offered. This is what we need to change for and start to look at. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how the next year goes as well, with so many new advances and innovative products coming out at the moment.
Mm. Yeah, Elsa, and I think I agree. We see that, right, in the sense of like employees wanting more and different things, as well as, again, as you're talking about, one of the things that hopefully we'll cover as part of the insurance section as well is, how do you think about the things that are included, aren't included, and as well as the different rules of the policies, right, as well, in terms of what they can and can't allow, because as we know, insurers don't move at the same speed as the market does necessarily sometimes as well. So how does that continually evolve, right, based on what employees are demanding? I guess, also any perspective from your side as well, having just gone through that process?
Yeah, I think there's maybe two things, which is particularly if you're in a smaller organization, I think you want to think about, for me, two things also. It's how does your reward philosophy perhaps serve your diversity and inclusion policy? How are you using your benefits and your total reward package to attract different kinds of candidates to your organization? The other thing I would say is, whenever you're asking for an investment in benefits or in reward, you also need to be quite commercial, and especially in a downturn where we are struggling to make our budgets stretch. It's think about how do you convince your leadership that the money that you're investing on reward is going to deliver a return. So be really commercial about what's the impact on profitability, on gross margin, on productivity levels, on your sales turnover. There's hundreds of metrics that you could look at. So really think about also how does your reward philosophy serve everyone else.
And I see there's a comment from Mandeep there. They can't hear you. We can hear you, I think. So yeah, it might be on your end, Mandeep, possibly. But also, yeah, which I think is good, right? It brings us to the next point there, which is in terms of how do you get buy-in, right? So like you just went through this process. Yeah, maybe let's have a go into that in terms of, as we all kind of mentioned, benefits is one component of a reward package, and companies are thinking about how does that change from all the different kind of components, right? But yeah, what was your experience like, especially in this kind of new environment that we see ourselves in terms of getting buy-in internally?
So I think about, in terms of getting buy-in, well, one of the first things you need to understand is, what do your employees actually want? And I would say employees in the large sense, it's about not only the people that you've got in your organization, but the people who you want to attract to your organization and you're failing to attract to your organization. And there's a number of ways you can do that. You can of course do that informally. So you've already got a lot of data in your organization. Ask your teams, your people team, your TA team, key opinion leaders in the organization. But you can also do a formal survey. So I would really start with gather some insights. But the next thing you really want to do, for me, is you want to map your stakeholders, right? You want to make sure that you are speaking to different people in your organization. Of course, there's your leadership team, and they're going to be really key for you, right? But you also want to engage your wider network. Who's going to be influential, or who has a particular view on benefits? Who do you need on side so that you're all speaking with one voice when you're going to go get buy-in, right? And then I think what you need to figure out is what is important to each of those stakeholders when you're putting together that benefits proposition. And it's not the same message, that you're not going to give the same message to your employees that it's not the same discussion that you're going to have with your leadership team, right? So it sounds perhaps very obvious. I think that the main thing for me is always arm yourself with research and data. You've got employee listening surveys, probably candidate surveys. Look at your exit interviews. Is there anything there that you can leverage? As I say, interview opinion leaders and people in your organization. Are there quotes? Are there stories from real employees that you can use and refer back to? And of course, benchmark externally. You need to understand what's happening in the external market. But if I'm trying to get buy-in to implement and improve benefits, and this comes back to my point on being commercial, chances are I'm asking my organization to make a significant investment. And I need to be very commercial to show them what the money that they're going to invest is going to affect the bottom line. And think about, so what is the objective here? Is it that we're struggling to attract top-tier candidates? Is it driving turnover? Is there high absenteeism? And then try and quantify that. So, for example, if you're trying to attract candidates, right, what does this mean for your performance and productivity? Are you getting the right people in the door? And how does that impact your P&L? Do you have vacancies? how does that impact productivity or sales turnover? And how does it impact all of the colleagues along? So those would be the things that I would do. And then I'd say you also want to be quite strategic in your communication. I think often we have a tendency of giving too much information to our leadership teams. And I would say, what are the 3 things that they need to retain? You know, and what's the data and the stories that you're going to use to support that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of good points in there, right? In terms of how to communicate, how to think about what to offer. Yeah, Figen, Charlie, any kind of reactions from your side as well in terms of what you see? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think for us, in terms of getting buy-in, we're not on dealing with the insurance side of things, would be the biggest pushback we get. Our main contacts we're dealing with are HR, people managers, head of people. And I think the hardest part is getting the buy-in when it gets further up the line, go to finance directors. With the current climate that we're in at the moment, every time we turn on the TV, it says there's a recession coming. I think people are concerned about the purse strings, which is obviously a key point. And I think one of the things that we look at when we're dealing with benefits that we're seeing a big change is beforehand, about a year ago, all the conversations were solely how can I help support my employees? How can I help my employees? How can I attract and retain the best talent? We're also starting to see a different approach coming in, particularly on health insurance, which is where it's been led by directors, FDs, where they're looking at more how it can support the business. So say, for example, if someone is to go off with a back injury, we're blessed in the UK to have the NHS, but we're underfunding, overuse. How long will it be until someone gets that support? How long are they going to be off work? And I think one of the things that a lot of particular finance teams are starting to look at is what's the risk versus the reward of also not having something to support people back into work. And I think that's changing the buy-in, because if you've got some of your key employees off work because they're not able to access healthcare straight away, people are starting to look at it as not just an employee benefit, but also, look, this is a business benefit. If we've got health insurance in place, people are going to get the care they need as soon as possible. You've got group income protection, has early intervention, rehabilitation support to help staff back to work. And I think that's one of the shifts that we're seeing. Beforehand, a lot of it with HR and people managers would be asking about, look, what are the full benefits for the rewards? A lot of now we're getting is requests for data about, can you give us some stats about the early intervention, the rehabilitation? How often is this used? In particular, certain industries more than others will see such high usage that we're having a lot more requests for this to say, like, look, can you provide a stat so I can feed this back? And I think that's one of the things for getting buy-in is, look, when you're discussing it with people leaders, it's on your plans for 2023. Is it just rewarding, attracting, retaining your talent? There's also that element of how much can it save the business? How can this help the business long term if one of your key employees is to go off?
I think one of the things that is remarkable to us, at least, and it depends on the level of, I guess, maturity of a business and a reward team as well, is the conversation around the ROI, right? Which is hard. It is generally hard in terms of, hey, how do you tie exactly the benefit spend and what's being spent on, insurances and pension and everything else with what is that return to the business? And the way that we usually have that conversation is one very data driven, right? So like if you think about having the conversation with your FD or with the leadership team, I think as both Elsa and you and Charlie mentioned, is like be armed with the data, right? Whether it is talking about benchmarking of what else is out there in terms of what other companies are doing, or what your employees are asking for, or what is the ultimate benefit based on what's come out of it. And then effectively looking at the way that we break it down is usually like a direct, potential saving of some sort. There are benefits in many countries and things like that are statutory, that are locally competitive, and good luck hiring people in certain markets with different things not having that competitive offering, right? It's going to be very difficult. On the flip side, and how do you make that as budget use as efficient as possible, right, from an ROI point of view? And then you have the soft, I guess, right, benefits, or indirect, which are a bit harder to attribute, but would be, in terms of like how much quicker can we can we close a candidate because we are offering a competitive? How much are we seen as a great employer brand out there, right? Because we are offering a really competitive package. How much choice, how much productivity might there be? How much does it influence absenteeism, et cetera, et cetera? It's just very hard to tie those things one to one, but making that as well as part of the conversation, I think it's a good one. I guess, yeah, Figen, anything that you've seen as well in terms of when you're having that discussion, especially as a consultant, right, coming in and advising companies to think about how to think about this?
Yes, I mean, obviously, just hearing what Elsa had to say with her journey as well, and how the benefits are now shifting going forward. I think as reward professionals, we have to have this dual kind of role. One is that we provide all the kind of data-driven decisions, or helping decisions based on data for our leadership team, who, if you want to say, hold the purse. But also we have to play the other role and make sure that we are the right advocates for the employees. We do get the benefits that mean the most to our employees. So we need to have this dual role of making sure that we as reward professionals can manage to please both sides and get to the outcome that's beneficial, both from the organizational perspective, obviously financially, but also from the employee perspective. I think what I'm seeing with my clients is, as I said, definitely an onus on benefits. And the $1 million question is always, Figen, what is it something different that we can do than everybody else is doing? It's like the golden egg. And it's not so much what is it that you can do something different that everybody else is doing. I think it's how much can you, for me, it's almost like, how much do you believe behind what you stand for from the benefits perspective, so that you're not putting the benefits in place for the sake of having. It's not a scroll. It's not a shopping list. They need to be meaningful. The employees need to engage with those benefits. It has to be for the benefit of, of their lifestyle and their journey in the organization that you are. So that's kind of what I'm seeing right now, that, I've had clients that have said, we know we will never be able to compete in the market out there from the compensation perspective, but we know we can place ourselves in the top percentile and have the benefits that are rich. And I think they've gone and implemented quite a few things, from leave of absence type benefits for the employees, and they've taken a truly global approach. So regardless in which country, which jurisdiction you are, actually the level of the benefit is the same. You get the richest one out of all the countries. That's what applies to everybody else. So which maybe that is the golden egg, right? So so that's what I'm seeing kind of with my clients and what is happening out there.
Yep. I think it's really helpful, right? As you start to think, especially from that global point of view, do you go with what's locally competitive? Do you go beyond? Do you kind of harmonize? That's a conversation that we're constantly having, at least in terms of, okay, what should the design be, right? And there's pros and cons, and it's not clear cut, right? And it all ultimately, I think also you made the point, right? Depends on what's your objective here, right? Like, why are you thinking about doing it in this way? And which I think is an interesting one in terms of, and we can have that conversation. We had a couple questions around, like, if you're just starting to think about this from a smaller company kind of perspective, what should smaller businesses prioritize if you have a limited budget? Yeah, any perspective that you guys have in terms of, like, where would you start? Say you're a smaller company with a limited budget, what do you start with?
I mean, I have worked with companies that less than 100 people. I don't know if that's, I see the question is more around 10 employees, but I work with a company with less than 100 people. Obviously, small company, very limited budget. So it always starts, and I know it's obvious, but it always starts with, are we compliant? Do we have things that we must have legally? And then what is it that we can do over and above that the budget allows us to do? And it's usually really, as Elsa said, just listen to the employees. They'll tell you what they want. There's no need to guess. There's no guessing game. The only thing I would caveat there very carefully is that by listening to the employees, don't set expectations that everything that they say you will be implementing, right? Otherwise, we will have a benefit for a person out there. But yes, just listen to what they want. Listen to what they would see most useful in their life, the point that they are at, and just makes pull all of that data in again to stating the obvious, take that data, take it to the leadership and say, I've spoken to the employees, this is what they would value the most, these are the 3 or 4 whatever you can afford over and above of what you've done from the statutory perspective. I just want to add one thing which I really took with me, which was incredibly interesting with one of these smaller organizations, is that one of my clients had an incredibly young organization, small, 70 of them, and the leadership wanted a really rich pension plan. And
Yeah.
we're like, oh, this group of people don't really think about pensions. They're really young. And I spoke to the broker at the time, and she said, no, trust me, this is going to go really well. We just need to kind of educate them as how they can make savings in the pension plan, and how for every £50 that you put, there's another £150 going into your pension plan. As someone who's done this for a long time, I was really skeptical. But long story short, we've ended up every single employee actually adding voluntary contributions over and above the limit, because they understood exactly how that pension plan works, exactly the savings that we're making, exactly how much more money would come from social security savings, from tax savings, and also from the employer contributions. So also, while we're thinking that some benefits may not work, I think it's also a lot down to educating and communicating and engaging the employees with the benefits.
Yeah, I thought for a second there, I thought that was going to go the other direction in the sense of like it totally went off the rails and didn't work. But I think the point that you make around the communication is really important, right? Especially when it comes to complicated products like insurances and pensions and everything else, which, if you're not in the market like Charlie, you are, and this day in, day out, right? It's difficult to understand what is covered, what is not covered, how do these work? Is there a tax saving? Is there not a tax saving? And confusingly, right, this depends per geography and right. So how do you think about that, which maybe is a nice segue into maybe having a conversation around how do you think about that critical element, which for a lot of companies comprises the majority of benefits budgets. It's insurances and pensions and everything else. So maybe Charlie, you can lead us on in terms of how should you think about this as a bigger company, as a smaller company, and maybe we can start with if you are just getting started, where do you start, right, with a limited budget as well?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's good. And to be honest, every conversation we pretty much start on the insurances, we're asked, all right, what should I offer? What's the most common? What's everyone else doing? Throwing out names. And unfortunately, there's not one size fits all. It's completely different. And even breaking it down to industries, because we're going to we deal with certain companies who are just starting up, but then have large VC funding or investment behind them, who want to have the full suite no matter the size. Whereas you've then got other businesses, which would be SMEs that have been going for a few years and want to start giving back to their staff. There's a wide range of differences. I would say, so in terms of where to start in the first instance, so before, my opinion, I always say to our clients, before even going out to your employees and asking what they want, I would say find yourself a broker. You pay the exact same. So if you buy insurance for a broker or you go directly to the insurers, it's the exact same cost. The insurers build in a percentage. So if you buy it directly from the insurer, they'll use that to pay the sales team. If you buy it for a broker, it's paid to the broker. Now, the reason I say go to a broker in the first instance is to get them to go through all the options with you and give you the costs of every product. We've been involved in a few times where clients have come to us and said, do you know what? I've surveyed my staff. They all want health insurance that covers pre-existing conditions. You've got the price. And then we're sat there like, okay, this is an awkward condition because I can't offer that to them. So I would say, especially when we're looking at budgets, before going to your employees and finding out, is get a broker, make sure they don't charge you a fee because that's not standard industry practice, and ask them to go out to the market and prepare the prices for you on numerous different levels. Because once you've then found out, all right, these are the options that are available in the market, you can then go out to your staff, interview your staff and find out, survey your staff on what they want to do. because I think if you send out, we've done free survey in the last 3 years, we've done 3 surveys, and health insurance is always the most desired benefit. I think it's because people know that's the most expensive benefit. Buying it individually is going to cost a lot. Also, it covers a lot on there. But there are alternatives such as cash plans and different low costs. So I'd say first instance when you're working on a budget would be to get a broker to then go and find out the options. Next up though, before any other decisions, as the other two have mentioned, it's definitely actually asking your staff what they want and surveying them. So we had one company beforehand who pretty much told all their staff, took 15 minutes. They sent them all a Kit Kat. They said, take 15 minutes, take a break, fill out this survey online and tell us everything that you need to know, because there is nothing worse also launching a whole range of benefits, every product, to then be sat there in a year's time and go, wait a minute, no one's used any of these, no one's used the dental, no one's used the optical. And you say, that's maybe because you launched everything a bit too rushed and didn't really find out what was suitable. Because I think, David, you'll probably know more than anyone, the reason you guys started Ben is you've got one employee who life insurance, this may be fantastic. And then you've got the other age where someone goes, you know what, I don't want any of that. I prefer to have discount vouchers. I prefer to have shopping range, cycle to work schemes. So I think no matter the size of the organisation, if you're starting on a first time, it is to first find out, look, what's actually available in the market, because there are so many offers. Then have a look at the budget and then go to your employees before implementing that and finding out. I think that would be my stage for me for any business first starting off, instead of just saying, do you know what, this is what we're going to offer? Fantastic.
Yeah, I think getting an idea of what, because a lot of times we'll have conversations as well, especially for folks who haven't rolled out different types of products and things, of knowing what things cost, right? And an expectation as well, right? Some folks are like, hey, we can't offer life insurance because it's going to be really expensive. Well, it depends, right? And it turns out, like in the UK, it's actually a pretty good value benefit, right, versus other ones. So it really depends on what's required, as well as what's your budget, which is also the conversation, right? You can't offer everything, and if you try to, which is where something like Ben also comes in, is trying to make things as flexible as possible, so that it is relevant to the different employees. I guess, yeah. Also, if you can, especially the other point that you made there, that is really interesting in terms of the communications, which I think Figen is where you were going at with the conversation around pension, also, right? In terms of rolling out, deciding what you want to offer is a small step into actually rolling out the plan, but like communicating what is included and what is not included is a big question that every time we roll out, you also still get, right? So I guess, like, Elsa, if you can, any perspective, having dealt with and rolling out some of these insurance products in the past, in terms of what worked, what didn't work.
Maybe Figen, do you want to go? And
yeah, sure, no problems else. I think with insurance products, I think they're probably the most complicated ones out there for the employees to understand. And you really need to educate them as to how they work. Sometimes it's for them, sometimes their families can tap into them, or whatever it is. But I think it's really educating constantly and all the time. And Charlie probably knows this. If you work with a broker, they will bring the providers that you have signed up your benefits with to do webinars, to educate your employees. And, some brokers will do it for free in the first instance, and they charge a smaller fee to do it, during the year. But most of them will do a webinar at least at the implementation time, and they'll be doing another webinar when it comes to the re-enrollment of the benefits, because obviously it's in their interest to be able to continuously provide that benefit for that organization. So tap into that, take them up on and ask. I mean, if you work with a broker like, Charlie's organization, they will sort it out for you. They will say, listen, we can also, prepare these webinars for you. And by any chance, if you work with a broker who doesn't say anything, ask the question. Can they come and educate our workforce? I mean, even us as reward professionals, we know how everything works. Well, we know how some things work in some places. We don't know every single thing in every single country. So we need the professionals to come and educate our employees. And if you keep that going, even if it is with kind of quarterly communication, promotions or whatever it is, I think you just need to kind of keep at employees being able to tap into that, benefit information, put them on your intranets, arrange we used to call them road shows. I don't know if they're still called benefit road shows. Arrange those. It's always nice. I mean, in the past we used to do desk jobs. They are a bit more difficult now with a hybrid workforce. But one of my clients did send little brownies through the post, and with a little note of, we've implemented these benefits, why don't you come and listen to it, or whatever else. So there's other ways that you can still engage even with your remote workforce, and with the benefits in the organization.
I think that's the great point you've made there as well, is it's when the benefits are launched, you should be, if you've even gone directly with an insurer for whatever reason, get them to do that on board in WebEx, because a lot of people see health insurance or see life insurance. Some of the life insurers will offer so many life insurers these days add mental health counselling, nutritionists, so second medical opinion services, virtual GPs, everything that's included along those side. If you've got the WebEx, this will one, support the staff, but then the broker will also record that WebEx for you. And as Figen said, you load it onto your intranet, because the main thing is, I think when you start a new company, if you're told, all right, you've got all these benefits, you're like, okay, you're then given sort of, as we all know, the insurers, there's a lot of policy documents and if you're given sort of 5 different terms and conditions policy documents and told, read through them to learn about your benefits, you're just not going to, if we're honest, and you're not going to be like, one of the things that we said, it's about adding family members on certain schemes. You can only add them with enrollment windows, flexible benefits. Again, we could go on all day, but these are the things where making sure that you're recording these WebExes, doing them, as Figen said, most brokers, if you ask them, even if they haven't offered, if you say, look, can you do this once every so often for my staff, or can we do this annually? They will do that for you.
Maybe, yeah, and given the topic as well, I think it would be interesting to have, and I see some of the kind of questions coming up, right, when it comes to employee surveys and things, especially as we're talking about the roadmap here in terms of, hey, how do you decide what to offer? When it comes to insurances and things, what have you guys seen successful? Maybe starting with the employee survey questionnaire here. One of the questions that we have was, when you're asking employees what they value the most, do you leave it as an open question, or you list all the different things that they can choose from? How do you guys think about that in terms of surveying the team?
Yeah,
I personally, sorry, go Charlie if you like.
No, it's good for yourself, Elsa.
I personally would say that you want to make the list long. So what we did is we said, choose the top 10 out of a defined list of 30. The challenge is that if you leave it open, you'll find it very difficult to then analyze that data, right? So it's better to then leave it quite open or list a lot of categories. And then if you need to bucket them, then necessarily leave a lot of open comment. Of course, you can then gather some qualitative feedback, so ask some qualitative questions, but otherwise it makes it very difficult for you to exploit. And I would say actually, typically what you get is that, what we found anyway, is that we surveyed 130 people and we gave them that list of 30 benefits to pick on, and only 2 people in that 130 people sample picked the same 10 benefits. And the other interesting thing was actually, and this is going back also to the question of what do you do in smaller scopes. So we've got countries where you've got so 5 of our markets have less than 10 people. But even so, in our bigger markets and in our smaller markets, you typically get 2 or 3 benefits that are very valued by everyone. And then everything else is kind of very, very personal. So you can then use that to guide your insurance choices as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point as well, right? In terms of, as you say, there are usually one or two big things, and they're typically insurance, pension, etc. type products that are, what's expected locally, and then you have, the long tail of a bunch of stuff that other people would choose if they could, right? So I always go back to the things like, hey, a cycle to work scheme would be really, really relevant if you're really into cycling and you're actually cycling to work. But if you're not, then it's completely irrelevant, right? Like you're never going to use it. I guess, Charlie, maybe coming back to you as well in terms of like when you are choosing different types of insurance products, all the way from medical through to, you mentioned income protection. There are so many, right? And then you start looking into, even specifically within medical insurance, there are like 50 options, right? So how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think for us, and I think this is the thing that it all leads back to. And I know people on here probably thinking, well, he's a broker, he's going to say this. Our opinion has always been, find someone, even if it's a rewards consultant, a benefit specialist consultant, that can tailor it to what your staff are actually looking for. In terms of starting with the surveys, I definitely think, I agree, I was going to say the exact same as Elsa, is keep it more limited instead of listing it as an open question, because when you put in an open question, you're going to find out, because there's so many options with health insurance and life insurance. Everyone's had their own product. Everyone's going to put their own thing. You're going to have people say, well, we've got to go with Bupa, we've got to do this, we've got to do... It will be just a minefield to deal with. So I think keeping it simple is the way to start. The next basis onto what insurances you offered when there's so much out there. I think it's really sitting down and working out, one, surveying your employees to find out what they're looking for, and then find out what the key needs are. With us, so we deal with predominantly, Hooray, our basis is a lot of SMEs, startups, businesses looking to do things for the first time. And I think the key things that we always go through people is we'll provide a report with numerous options. But the one thing I'm always keen to do is to point out to everyone is just remember that these insurance benefits that you're offering, they are contractual benefits as well. So once you've offered someone this insurance product, it's gone into their employment contract. So just remember, as you're planning to grow, some of, especially tech industry where you're experiencing hyper growth, you're going to be offering this for the lifetime of the product. So I always think it's good to, when you're looking at your benefits, work out what your growth plans are, what the budgeting is going to be. It's fantastic to have the best level of health insurance that's available. But if you're planning to hire you're planning to grow by 200%, is that going to be sustainable in a year's time? Because it's always good and well to be able to increase cover in a year's time, but to go in and say, all right, we're actually going to remove that benefit is not going to go down well. So I think with the huge range of options there are out there, it's always tempting to go, do you know what? Everyone's offering this. Oh, look, our biggest competitor is a Big Four accounting firm, but they've been around for hundreds of years. They've got the stability. And I think this is the thing, when reviewing the insurances, it's to bear in mind, these are probably going to be a massive part of your benefit spend, depending on how many staff you have. In the UK, life and health insurance is predominantly cheaper than in other regions, as we know from our international team, but it's still trying to work out, one, how long are you looking to offer it for? You can always start on one of the more basic levels of cover, or even say life insurance. You can start on a 2 times basic annual salary for everyone and increase that in a year's time if the profit's still there. So I think it's taking it back to the drawing board and really sitting down, reviewing what the staff want, and then reviewing your growth plans for the rest of the year.
I think it's really good points in there in terms of what I take away from that is, keep it simple in the beginning, right? In terms of what you're offering, and then see what the reaction is. And as you say, Charlie, it's much easier to give people more than it is to take something away because you don't have enough budget anymore for it, right? So like what we see is a lot of times companies who are and we in some aspects we like because it adds a lot of value through using a platform such as Ben. But on the flip side, if you make it too complex, or you try to be too ambitious in the beginning, that can backfire as well. And we've seen that happen in 1 or 2 occasions in terms of like pushing for a very ambitious design, especially if you have not as many people in a particular geography, or a very young team or whatever, where like it just might not be as applicable. I guess conscious of time, and we have 10 minutes or so, just touching, and I'll just touch on the quick question around the platform versus the DIY. And maybe I'll just stop here really, which is like the things as you're considering whether a platform might even make sense for you, right? And we had a questions around, for example, hey, when might we be, as a platform, be able to support smaller teams and things like that? And the reason why we kind of don't usually work with companies under 50 or so employees is a lot of times we might think a platform isn't necessarily going to add a lot of value to you as a company, right? So it all depends in terms of how many providers do you have, right? Like how much of an administrative nightmare might it be to manage all of these plans and things like that. And it turns out, if you're a small company offering not having a lot of benefits, then a platform like that won't make a lot of sense, right? It won't help you that much. It might be better suited by going through a broker directly, like Charlie or so, to get that sorted on the insurance side, and then sort of limited that offering. The second thing is the level of flexibility that you want to offer, right? So it's something that we've been talking about in terms of letting people choose their own benefits. Like try to do that sort of by yourself. I think it's being quite challenging, right? But if you're actually planning on, for whatever reason, for the time being, keeping it quite standard, then you might not need a platform as well, right? The third point there is around kind of countries and complexities. Every market operates slightly differently. So the more countries and geographies you have, the more a platform might make sense for you because, again, there's more administration, more to think of, more providers that go into it. And then I think there was a point made as well around team diversity, right? So how different are the needs? If you just have a young population that might require you think the same thing, then maybe that's not as relevant. The only thing to say there is like it's not only just age or gender or location, right? There's a lot of things that go into diversity in terms of needs. So I just think about it from that perspective. It's not as easy as here's the demographic split, and because of that, a platform may or may not make sense. But I just wanted to cover that quickly in terms of where we see it adding more value. I'll actually skip some of that just to give more chance for answering some of the questions here. And so maybe we deep dive right into that, right? Which is one of the questions from Elena, I think, which is we have a globally distributed team based in Berlin mostly. You want to provide flexible benefits. We're particularly interested in extending the benefits to contractors who have been there for the long term. And a lot of labor law, taxation things getting in the way. For remote workers also, employer record of model, tax-wise, what is the implication? Maybe I guess starting with you, Charlie, from the insurance standpoint in terms of contractors allowed, not allowed, how does this work usually? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to be honest, I'm very lucky. The international market is a minefield. So fortunately, my business partner deals with that because I can imagine for clients alone, seeing what you're going for, there's a lot for it to jump through. So in terms of the UK market, contractors are not allowed to be covered under the insurance plans. However, for yourself, Elena, with having companies, you're saying with global flexible schemes, I can get your details after this because I'm not sure in regards to Berlin if contractors can be covered, what the rules are and regulations. My business partner does head up our international team and will be able to give you advice about that. I can tell you for the UK market, contractors can't be covered as a standard. There are certain employer of records, as you've mentioned in there, though, that can cover contractors on the UK and offer them a wider scope of benefit due to the numbers that they have. I think one of the points that David's put on his previous side with the lack of flexibility on the platform lies in the insurance, this same point. The more numbers you have, the more rules that will be bent with insurances and they can open it up to things. But with the UK, contractors aren't as a standard. But I can take the details after this, and I've got to see you on LinkedIn. I'll send you a message, introduce you to my business partner because he actually looks after our international team and will be able to give you some advice, particularly around that market for yourself.
Yeah, I guess, and it's a good point, right? In terms of if you're hiring people externally that are not employees, like what do you do? What do you offer them? I guess, Figen, Elsa, have you guys come across that, and how do you think about it? Just because you can't you can't employ them technically, legally, from whatever perspective or for whatever reason, doesn't mean that they shouldn't get benefits in that sense, right? Because it's usually, in a lot of cases, what the at fault for the employer can't do it, right? But the employee would love to be employed by that employer in that particular location. So I don't know if you guys have seen anything there in terms of how to deal with contractors and especially in this new remote world. Yeah, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that predominantly the companies I work with, they have a, contingency workforce, which are the contractors. And regardless of which country they are, they do treat them same as Charlie said in the UK. The contractor is a contractor and is not therefore not an employee. If we provide any employee benefits to them, they can be reclassified if the organization gets audited, and it opens a whole array of legal issues for the contractor itself and the company. So that's one type of employment legalities that bring complexities into the employee benefits, but also through company records. So they usually provide benefits. Now the challenges that the organization have, that the employer record, they only have either basic benefits, they're not comparable to what organization provides to their own employees. And most of the time, at least from my experience that I have had, is that they are not very flexible in saying, right, okay, we will flex our benefits to achieve the same level as what you're providing. So it's kind of like off-the-shelf solution. So this is what we can provide, and this is what we'll charge back. So yeah, it brings a lot of complexities. But I think to your point, David, that you made with regards to your platform, think about how much resource you have inside to manage all of these complexities. Think whether it makes sense to have a platform such as Ben to lift that admin burden. Think about how much do you know how benefits are treated in each country, because a platform as Ben that provides you the payroll reports and how you process those through your payroll, it's very, very helpful. So I would say, especially in the complex world like that, think about how much you can leverage from the expertise you can get with a platform like this, especially if you want to be flexible, especially if you want to have a few core benefits and leave everything to the employees to choose through Ben. It will make your life easier, and you'd probably keep quite a bit of a bigger employee population happy, because they can make those choices for themselves and for them.
And I think it's and thanks for mentioning that, Figen. But and I think as Charlie mentioned, right? So like even Charlie having come from the brokerage world, like it's very different in the UK than it is in Berlin and different markets. And so getting the experts in or folks, and a lot of times it doesn't cost you anything, right? So, and sometimes it does, etc. So it's like you have to make the pros and cons conversations, but it's always worth having that conversation with folks externally, right? To be like, especially people who have done this multiple times, right? In terms of like, hey, what is your perspective here? What should I be offering? Because the reality is it is complex, especially as you go into the regulated type products, legal conversations in terms of, contractors and not contractors. How do you deal with it? Taxation, what's taxable, not taxable. And, as us as a young global benefits platform, we're always learning in terms of like what are companies doing, and the market is always evolving, right? So that's some of the complexities that come out. I think, any conscious of time, and we'll wrap up here in a minute, just to be very mindful of folks' time throughout the rest of the day. Any other final thoughts, right, from you guys, Figen, Charlie, Elsa, in terms of, hey, you're just starting on this journey, thinking about what to roll out? I think we've covered a lot today, right, in terms of how do benefits fit into the total reward package? How do you get buy-in from internal stakeholders and decide what to do? How do you think about insurances, and then quick on a platform versus doing it yourself? I guess based on your experience, any final thoughts for folks who are just starting in this journey?
Sorry, no, go ahead, Elsa.
What I would say is just that you need to think also about the value that you as a team bring from a reward perspective to the business, right? And I think to Figen's point, for me, you need to think about what we bring to the table. And often I feel we spend a lot of time building complex benefits and then having to administer them and spend a huge amount of energy on that. And actually, I think the way the world is going is that we need to keep up to speed with what the organization and our people need and evolve that roadmap. And so we need to shift our approach, which is we need to become more curators of benefits, evolving and reviewing the proposition and coaching our teams and educating them and helping them through the various options that are available. And so for me, that's kind of why we decided that a flexible benefits platform was ideal for us, right? Because we want to make that shift. We almost want to externalize all of the administration and be able to give a much wider offer on choice to employees without having to do the work necessarily in-house. That would be my last thought.
Yeah, Charlie, you also wanted to say something as well.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say was some of the most successful ones that we've seen would be if you're planning to launch benefits this year, I would say reach out again. The HR industry, there's so many networks on like if you go on LinkedIn, your HR groups, different group support networks, and I think find out from other people in your industry what's gone well, which products have launched. Word of mouth recommendation, I would say definitely finding out, as you said, which platforms are suitable. What if I've got an international team? Before going out and speaking to any provider, I say reach out to those networks, because the referrals that we've had from other people have always been, look, this went well, we can do this, so and so. It's good to get that back in from people in your industry before going out, because yeah, I'm talking about the insurances is a bit of a minefield. Then you layer everything else on top. Again, it's a lot of work for the first year. So finding out what's worked well for others is always a good way to start.
Yeah, leaning in on your peers, definitely. I guess, Figen, any final thoughts from you before we close off?
Definitely don't think that what you've implemented today with your roadmap and the great ideas, and you've done all the forums, everything, it needs to stay. It needs to just renew itself over and over and over again. Keep an eye during your first year what is happening. Make sure that a lot of your providers will give you some reporting on the usage. They'll come back and talk to you about how many employees have tapped into their services. Keep looking at that data. And if necessary, you can feed that to your leadership to have a more sound kind of case for when it comes to renew your benefits in the next year. They don't have to be stale. Review it, keep up with what's happening out there. Don't be scared to remove benefits if no one is using them. Because that's the little bit thing we think, oh, maybe they didn't know this year, we'll leave it for next year. Take it away. If they want it next year, they'll ask for it. So yeah.
Or somebody will yell about it, and then you'll know that they actually care about it. So
exactly.
Or not. Sometimes they don't, right? So yeah. Okay, cool. Be mindful of time. We're about 2 minutes over. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks Figen, Elsa, Charlie for the really helpful conversation. Really appreciate you guys taking the time. And yeah, I think we're all on LinkedIn, so you guys can find us there if you want to continue the chats. But thanks everybody for joining, and have a good rest of your Tuesday. Really appreciate it. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.